Have you ever stopped and thought, why did the year change? Like, how did we get the number we use? We often think it was just one single event, right? Some old decree. But that's not quite right. Today, we're diving deep into two really distinct but definitely connected changes that totally reshaped how we track time.
That's right, and we'll break down both for you. First, there's how the whole BC ad system for actually numbering the years got started. And second, there's the big calendar reform, moving from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian one we use now. That was much more about scientific accuracy. And what's really cool is how you had popes and mathematicians kind of working together on this stuff.
Yeah, it's quite a story. So settle in. We're going on a trip through the centuries, looking at the brain power, the religious reasons, and some pretty surprising facts behind the calendar you check every day. Okay, so let's dig into that dating system first. This Anno Domini or AD thing, who came up with that, and what was the reason?
Well, the AD system, Anno Domini, Year of Our Lord,
Yeah.
that goes back to a monk, Dionysius Exiguus. This was around AD 525. His main job, his big goal, was actually figuring out the date of Easter correctly. The church was really focused on that. See, after the Council of Nicaea set the rules, he wanted to replace the older system, which was tied to the Roman Emperor Diocletian, seen as a bit, pagan-centric, so he anchored it to the birth of Christ instead. What's fascinating, though, is that most scholars today think his calculation for Christ's birth was actually off by a few years, or maybe 4 to 6 BC.
Wow, okay, so he starts AD, but the before Christ part, the BC, that came later.
Exactly, yeah, quite a bit later.
Yeah.
BC wasn't Dionysius's invention. That was added around AD 731. It was by the Venerable Bede, an English monk, in his big history book. Bede really helped spread the AD system, but he also added the idea of counting backwards from AD 1. That gave us the whole timeline. And then in the 9th century, Charlemagne gave it a huge push, making it pretty standard across Western Europe.
And here's something I find really interesting. There's no year zero. It just jumps from 1 BC to 81.
That's true. And it trips people up sometimes. It basically comes down to the fact that the concept of zero as a number, as a placeholder like we use it, just wasn't really part of Western math back when Dionysius was working. So he didn't include it. It's a historical quirk that astronomers, for example, later had to kind of work around.
Okay, so that's the numbering sorted. But you said the calendar itself changed. Let's talk about the old one, the Julian calendar. Julius Caesar, right?
Yep. Julius Caesar introduced it around 46 BCE. It had 12 months, 365 days, and the leap year rule, an extra day every 4 years. So an average year of 365.25 days. It was a massive improvement for its time, but it wasn't perfect. It slightly overestimated the actual solar year, the time it takes Earth to orbit the sun, only by about 11 minutes and 14 seconds.
Just 11 minutes? That seems so small. How did that little bit of time cause such a big problem?
Well, yeah, it seems tiny day to day, but those 11 minutes add up. Every year, another 11 minutes. Over a century, that's almost a whole day. So by the 1500s, the calendar was off by about 10 days compared to the actual seasons. And this caused huge problems for the church, especially with Easter. The date of Easter depends on the spring equinox, which the Council of Nicaea had pegged to March 21st. But because of the drift, the actual equinox was happening around March 11th by the 16th century. So the religious calendar was out of sync with the seasons. That inaccuracy was the real driver for change.
Okay. So the need to fix Easter pushed the calendar reform.
Yeah.
And that brings in Pope Gregory III.
Exactly. Pope Gregory III that took charge. In 1582, he issued a papal bull that's like a formal decree called Intergravissimus. The main goals were get the calendar back in line with the sun and put the spring equinox back on March 21st. And to do that, they had to make a jump. They decreed that the day after Thursday, October 4th, 1582, wouldn't be October 5th.
Wait, what was it then?
It was Friday, October 15th. They just skipped 10 days overnight to catch up.
Wow, just deleted 10 days. Okay, who are the math brains behind this? It couldn't have just been the Pope.
Oh, definitely not. The key ideas for the new leap year system came from an Italian doctor and astronomer, Aloysius Lilius. Sadly, he died before it was implemented. But the guy who really finalized it, championed it, was Christopher Clavius. He was a German Jesuit mathematician, head of the Vatican Commission doing the work. Super important figure. They kept the basic leap year every 4 years rule, but added a clever tweak for century years. A century year like 1700, 1800, 1900 is not a leap year unless it's also divisible by 400.
Ah, okay, so 1600 was a leap year and 2000 was.
Exactly, but 1700, 1800, 1900 were not. This simple change makes the calendar incredibly accurate. The old Julian calendar drifted a day every 128 years. The Gregorian, it's off by only about 27 seconds a year, meaning it takes over 3,000 years to be off by a single day. Huge improvement.
That's way more accurate. But you mentioned resistance. It sounds like it wasn't exactly adopted everywhere immediately, even with the science being better.
Not at all. No, it was quite messy, actually. Catholic countries like Italy, Spain, Portugal, France, they switched pretty much right away in 1582. But Protestant countries,
Right.
and later Eastern Orthodox nations, they were deeply suspicious. Saw it as a Catholic plot, the papal empire trying to impose its will. So they resisted, sometimes for centuries.
Right, so you had different parts of the world using different calendars for a long time.
Absolutely. Great Britain and its colonies, including America, didn't switch until 1752. By then, they had to skip 11 days. Russia only adopted it after the revolution. In 1918, they had to skip 13 days. Greece was one of the last in 1924. So for hundreds of years, you had this chronological chaos, depending on where you were. It really shows how scientific progress can clash with national or religious identity.
That's fascinating. So how did it become the global standard then?
Gradually, for civil and practical purposes, it just made sense. International trade, communication.
Mm.
It helps if everyone's on the same page, date-wise. It eventually became the de facto standard globally, and then was formally recognized by international standards bodies like ISO 8601 in 1988. And alongside that, starting way back in the 17th century, you also saw the terms Common Era, or CE, and before Common Era, BCE, start to appear. They're numerically identical to AD and BC, but offered as more religiously neutral alternatives, reflecting a more diverse and secular world.
So when we ask why the year changed, it's really this two-part story. First, setting up the BCA numbering system, driven by religious needs.
Right, primarily calculating Easter.
And second, the massive scientific correction of the calendar itself, the Gregorian reform, to align it with the actual solar year, driven by that initial religious need, but executed with, well, some serious math.
Exactly. It's a fantastic example of how knowledge develops, how we refine our understanding, and frankly, how important critical thinking is. Sorting through tradition, science, belief.
Yeah, it really makes you think. Our whole grasp of history depends on this agreed-upon system of time. So here's something to maybe chew on. What other systems, maybe ones we think are totally fixed and invisible today, might be heading for their own surprising adjustment in the future? Something to think about until our next deep dive.